Hello and welcome to the Ahead of the Game podcast. I'm your host, James Oxford, and today I've got Pete Valencia and Jeremy Kempt here with me to discuss the recent trade sending Karl Anthony-Towns to the Knicks for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, Keita Bates-Diop, and a protected first-round pick originally from Detroit. We're going to dive into the Knicks first. So, Pete, what are your initial thoughts on what this trade does for the Knicks against the top Eastern Conference teams?
Well, I think the big thing about this trade is we look at the Celtics, and obviously Porzingis was the biggest addition to their team. And no offense to Drew Holiday, but Porzingis is just a matchup nightmare for a lot of teams. You know, he's not got many guys that big that can shoot from that far out, that do as many things as he can do on the floor. And I think adding in Karl Anthony-Towns, I don't think he's the rim protector Porzingis is, and that might be a factor down the line, but I think it is trying to match that 3 point volume at the five position that the Celtics have. And this obviously will help them there. I mean, KAT's as good as you can get for a 3 point shooting big man, and he's gonna put him up. We know that he's gonna put him up every game. So I think it's also interesting to see giving up Dante and the pick it's a steep price to get KAT. So I think the expectation should be kind of high. As we were talking before, I mean, Dante was their second best player during that run last year, and he was carrying the scoring burden for them on a lot of nights. So it's a steep price to pay for KAT, and we'll see how it works out. But I think it could be really great. I think it could be a thing that really helps their offense. I think the pick and roll with Brunson, the pick and pop is going to be really tough to cover. I mean, people said that about Embiid and James Harden, although hopefully this will probably work out a little bit better than that. But yeah, I think it opens up a lot of really interesting things on offense for them.
And Jeremy, what are your initial thoughts?
So my initial thoughts to not kind of repeat a lot of the stuff that Peter said is I'm looking at this differently because prior to this trade, we also have to remember they also acquired Mikal Bridges. So there's levels to this now. Now they've essentially acquired a defensive team, which is what the Celtics had to put together to finally get over the hump. They had a lot of offensive firepower for a long time. They failed with the Kyrie experiment. Nothing worked until you bring in a guy like Porzingis to kind of really Andrew Holiday. You brought in defensive-minded guys who can still score, and the Knicks are kind of doing something similar because Mikal Bridges can play both sides of the ball to a very high level. You've also now bringing in a guy like KAT who's a really good rebounder. And then think about it from a salary cap perspective. This is the first year that KAT's contract actually kicks in because he signed a 4-year contract with Minnesota last year, I believe, if I remember my math right. So that contract is just about to kick in. So there's going to be some restructuring on the Knicks side, but it's not going to kill them long term. So what this does for the Knicks is you've added that firepower now with your Jalen Brunson, with your Josh Harts and all that stuff. So now you have a team that's built, really, it's built to give Philly all the problems they want, and they're built if they play their cards right and stay healthy, because health's going to be a big factor for this as well, because KAT's had his share of injuries just like Julius Randle did. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So if this team stays healthy, it's one of the few teams in the East that is on paper and really just by statistically ready to beat the Celtics in a 7-game series. Now they're going to have to come with it, but it can be done. I think that KAT and Porzingis thing may actually cancel each other out because they won't be as dominant rebound wise. Because what you were getting from Porzingis on the rebound side, Mikal Bridges also comes in, which helps with White as well, because White's another one of the Celtics' really good rebounders. So you've got 4 players who almost can kind of cancel each other out. So it comes down to the guards, the Jalen Brunsons, the Drew Holidays, and their ability to rebound and push that ball up the floor. So it's going to be a really interesting start to this season when these teams really start getting it together.
Yeah, I think that KAT does lack a little bit of the rim protection Porzingis brings, but then you're absolutely right that the Knicks have insulated him with really good perimeter defenders. I'll say the 1-5 pick and rolls may be a little bit tough unless they get creative with their matchups because Brunson and KAT defensively, that's a little bit of an issue. But again, I wouldn't expect them to be having Brunson guard the primary initiator on most nights anyway with all this other defensive kind of playmakers and defensive stalwarts. Brunson should be trying to hide Brunson defensively, really. So it will be interesting to see what kind of schemes Tibbs comes up with because defensively he's one of the top minds in the game, and he kind of almost has enough depth to maybe not play all of his top guys 40 minutes a game. I don't know. That would be nice.
Will he do it?
Will he do it? That's always the question. Mitchell
That's a great
Robinson
question.
is going to be an interesting re-addition when he's healthy.
Mm.
I don't know exactly when that's going to be,
No
but
one knows.
the idea of maybe Cat playing, I know we all got scared when they added Gobert last year, and we said now Cat's got to play the four, but it actually ended up being a pretty good experiment for them. So Cat next to Robinson could be an answer in some matchups. I'm not sure the Celtics is the right matchup for that answer, but there are some matchups. Now, looking at the Celtics, though, I will say there's really not anywhere to hide them. They have four really good ball handlers, and then Porzingis, who just kills you on the pop. And if you try to switch it, then Porzingis gets you at that elbow area on the mismatch and just eats on the elbow. So it's a super hard matchup. I am interested to see what Tibbs comes up with if they have a playoff series. I don't expect to see many answers in the regular season just because you don't want to tip your hand defensively if you're Tibbs also.
Yeah, and I mean, just going off the way this has gone so far, the Knicks may not even be done. There may be another move or two. They may bring in another guard. So I mean, the Knicks did this the right way. They made all their moves prior to the season. I think we're like less than a week away or something like that from the preseason kicking off. So they did everything the right way. So now they're giving that team more time to actually gel before, as opposed to, let me grab them at the trade deadline. Let's survive the All-Star break. Like, let's go on a run. Like, no, we start the season with these guys. We build throughout the season. We go through our ups and downs, but when we gel, we gel. And we saw this with Boston last year too. Like, they didn't initially get it together when Porzingis got there. It took some games. There were some rough outings. Porzingis got into foul trouble a couple games, but then right around that Marchish area when things started to pick up, you started to see, okay, this Porzingis guy is going to be the X factor. He's going to be a problem. And, unfortunately he did get hurt in the playoffs, but he was a big part, of the early parts.
Yeah, I mean, that Celtics team was just so good they could withstand that injury. Pete, you had something to say? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I mean, with regards to the Celtics, I obviously was watching every single game the last year, and I mean, it's going to be hard to beat them. I think even without Porzingis, they dominated, and we just don't see that level. I mean, you see Joe Mazzulla talking to Pep Guardiola, and you see before Guardiola got to England, everyone thought the Premier League winning that two or more times was impossible. There's just too many good teams. Well, he's won it 4 straight times. And you think Joe Mazzulla has been very expressive about wanting more. And I think it's going to be, you got to compete with a legitimate psycho at head coach. And I think Tibbs is one of the only guys really poised to take him on in that sense. But at the same time, with Tibbs, the question is always, can his players survive a full season under him into the playoffs? I mean, I don't think there's been a year where he's had a fully healthy team going into the playoffs. I mean, even Derrick Rose is obviously, with his retirement being announced, people go to that. But you have guys like Luol Deng, Joakim Noah, and in the Timberwolves, Taj Gibson. How is that guy still in the league? He played all those years under Tibbs. But it's this thing where just guys don't hold up under him, and they end up, their careers kind of go down pretty quickly, and they out of the league before they really are able to hit the back end of their career, back end of their peaks. And I mean, I worry about like Josh Hart. What's he going to be at, like 32? I mean, he's playing 50 minutes a night when they go into OT, and it's just, is that sustainable for multiple seasons in a row?
Yeah, and I get what you're saying too. And my main pushback, if anything, would be, at the end of the day, I think fatigue is going to be the Celtics' worst enemy, because 3 of your key players also played in the Olympics. So they haven't really had a break mentally, not physically, mentally. And when you go back and you look at all these teams that went back to back or even three-peated, like, they talk about it. It's not the physical part of it. Yeah, there's rest that you need, but it's the mental side of it. Like, these guys have played basketball literally since last August. So now they're just rolling, so we're about to roll into the preseason. We're rolling in the training camp. We're rolling into the season. Like, and you know how Jason Tatum is. I can tell you're a Celtics guy. You got your Celtics pin up there. You know how there are times where Jason Tatum can be, I won't not say it goes, but inconsistent. That's the word we're going to use.
Yeah.
So how is he going to be when he's more mentally fatigued now? And these teams, like you talked about it with Tibbs, starts to apply that pressure on him now, to kind of, hey, let's see if we can kind of take Jaylen Brown out of the game a little bit, put the ball more in Tatum's hands, because we know Tatum's prone to be a little bit more exhaustive. He's not going to produce as he needs to on a consistent basis. There's a coaching thing, that you talked about. And I think that's where somebody like Tibbs has to think about it. Which I also think that a team like Philly is a team to look out for, because Philly adding Paul George also shouldn't be fall under the radar. That's actually a big move as well, because now you're adding more scoring, and that makes it harder for the Celtics on a matchup side, because now you've got a few more things you can do. So like it's going to be a difficult run for the Celtics, but I am curious to see how this team looks right around the All-Star break.
Absolutely. So go ahead and move on to the 76ers since you mentioned them. They did add Paul George. I will say that their depth is a little bit something to be desired. I'll say they really don't have much depth. Drummond behind Embiid, I guess, is actually pretty solid depth at the center spot, but that's the spot you need almost the least amount of depth. Maybe not the least because of injury concerns, but when it matters in games that matter, if Embiid's not there, it doesn't matter anyways. So in games that matter where Embiid's there, that's the spot you least need the depth. I do think the Yabusele addition was really interesting because he had a nice Olympics. He was someone I actually was really high on years ago in the draft. So it's interesting to see him get another run. Just looking at the depth, they have Lowry and Reggie Jackson behind Maxey. They have Eric Gordon behind Oubre, who I guess is starting at the shooting guard, although I'm not even sure about that. Like,
I thought Oubre was going to be their 3.
Or maybe Oubre's the 3 and Paul George is the 2. I don't know which way.
We'll see. Because I mean, Oubre is really a 3-4, so he could do either. So if you have Paul George as your 3, you move Oubre to your 4, and have Embiid as your 5 with Maxey.
And then we'll have Caleb Martin.
Yeah, they did add
Caleb Martin. So their depth is just not there. Even the starting lineup, I'm just like, where are they plugging these guys in? So they really went big 3 or bust, it seems like.
Jared McCain was a great addition. I mean, that guy during the draft, when he fell to 16, I was so angry. I mean, he's a guy. I don't like seeing Philly do well. But he's a guy, when he fell past 14, I'm like, this is why. I
don't even know if he should have fell past 10, 11.
Honestly, yeah.
I don't think he should have fell past 10 or 11. Like thinking about that, because this past draft wasn't very strong. But the players that were there, like a guy like that, he should not fall into the double digits like at all.
Yeah, he's someone who can contribute right away, I think, and also has a lot of room to grow. I mean, long term, how does the Maxey McCain backcourt work? Not entirely sure. You got 2 very undersized guys. But I think outside of that, Philly's depth is not looking the best. I think Drummond gives them good minutes at the backup 5, but as you said, you don't really need that much in big games. And I think the wing depth, is Caleb Martin going to produce his, Eastern Conference Finals performance again?
No.
Probably not, because he only does it against the Celtics when Eric Spoelstra performs his witchcraft.
Yes.
So that's
as a Miami Heat fan, I don't want any success for Caleb Martin.
Yes, he's a really interesting player. I was surprised he turned down more money from Miami. That was really surprising, because we've seen this go
practices.
Wrong. He wanted easier, yeah. I mean, that could be it. I mean, wow, Nick Nurse. I don't know if he's known for being any easier.
I'm about to say Nick Nurse ain't necessarily.
It's not so much that Nick Nurse has a reputation for being easy. It's just that in Miami, there's the reputation that it's the hardest to maintain. You got to maintain like the body fat percentages and stuff, and like they have all sorts of
and
requirements that other organizations
because the Don is the Don. We understand. There's reasons why Pat Riley has it set up the way he does, and there's a track record of success. Not in the last few years, but we've had some decent runs here, but not what we need to have. And we're only getting older.
I just know that there's some guys who thrive in that type of situation and like it. And there's some guys who thrive in that situation and still at the end of the day are like, man, I just want to go to another team. So it could be that type of situation, because it was a good fit, like scheme-wise, obviously.
Oh, yeah. And I really wanted Paul George. I thought we had a chance. I thought we were going to get him because it would have been a good addition for us. But, it happens.
Y'all want everybody, though.
No, I'm very specific. I'll probably be the most objective Heat fan you'll ever meet. Like I'm very specific about the players that I want, because like understanding Heat culture, like Paul George fits the culture. So
Now,
he would have been a shoe in for that, and he would have fit in well with what we have left at this point, because we don't have a lot left at this point.
now, I didn't dig into the numbers between Towns and Embiid, but just off of memory, it doesn't seem like it's favorable to Towns to me. But again, this isn't off memory. This is just
Yeah.
like anecdotal memories, and so
I mean, he
I
also
am
gives like
interested
he
to see
gives up a
that.
lot of weight to Embiid too. So like
He does.
if they're banging in the paint, Embiid's going to destroy him. It's just kind of how he's going to wear him out. Cat may out athletic him at the beginning of the game, but as the quarters wear on, he'll wipe the floor with him if he's
Do
banging
we
him in the post.
do we see Mitchell Robinson get a lot of minutes against
Right.
Embiid? I mean, is that
You might
something
have
where
to.
Because
we
you
see him
feel
like hide?
you feel comfortable putting Cat on like a Caleb Martin because like what is Caleb Martin gonna do off the dribble?
Not much.
Like not much, right? So you can definitely probably slide Cat over to the four there. Mr. Robinson at the five. Mr. Robinson has had success when not being elbowed in the head by Embiid. So uh, I think there's definitely some potential there for more Cat at the four, which is the
Yeah,
nice thing with Cat though. He gives you that flexibility, which some bigs don't. And so
yeah.
I
Well, and
definitely think
it gives them versatility if they decide to go small ball. If they go small ball and catch your five on against certain teams, like they're going to run the floor with certain teams.
yeah, absolutely. And then down the position chart, Brunson guarding Maxi probably no. I would probably assume they're gonna stick Bridges on Maxi and Anunoby on George would be my idea for the matchups.
You know,
Yeah.
And you just figure the 76ers are gonna have holes offensively with how little depth they have where you can find a spot to put Brunson.
yeah, and that's another player we didn't even really hit on was OG Ananobi and how he contributes to this mix. If he's healthy,
Yep.
this Knicks team is, if they're running on all cylinders, they're dangerous. Like they're dangerous. They've got enough guys to match up with Boston better than a lot of teams. As far as the East goes, they'll probably match up the best. There's only a few teams in the West that could sort of match up, but like as far as in the East, right now with that current roster as it stands, like that New York team could match up with Boston, and it would be a fun series. It'd be a fun Eastern Conference Finals, to tell you that much.
Yeah. I mean, sadly, we've been kind of starved of that with the injury bug biting, and that is my biggest question. As it's always the biggest question with these teams is who stays healthy.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I mean, do we really trust that Cat Ananobi and basically all the non-Villanova guys are going to be there at the end of the day? Like we know the Villanova guys are going to play, even if
Yeah.
Brunson has a bum ankle, he's going to play. And but the rest of the guys, like, are they going to be doing like Deuce McBride out there for 45 minutes a night in the playoffs again? Or are we going to see Pacom Dadier randomly get in a game? Like, is it going to be him or Marcus Morris? And it's going to be there's going to be some difficult like
Yeah.
situations they're put in from injuries, and I think that's something that's just kind of unavoidable. And you just got to ride the wave. If you're a team that wants to win a title, you have to be able to overcome that. And they get hit by more waves than any team of when it comes to injuries. And I
Yeah.
think they got to really hope that changes.
I think at some point it has to. Like no franchise can just go through that many years of obscurity without finally breaking through. Like we're not talking about the Dallas Cowboys here. We are talking about the New York Knicks. Like, they can do this. Now, and like I said, I still think there's a good chance they've got one or two more moves in there. And we don't even know what their G League team looks like. They may have some young talent down there that they decide to bring up. We don't know yet. We have to kind of see how that goes out as well. Like some of these teams are kind of hiding some guys that we haven't quite seen yet. And we're like, oh, where'd that guy come from? So there's a few things I think the Knicks can do, but I think controlling the minutes is going to be the biggest thing. Like if you're blowing a team out, man, get the starters out of it. Like let those guys that you just named, let those guys get some run. Figure out who's going to be at the back end of your playoff roster, because you know what's going to happen during the regular season. But who's going to be at the back end of your playoff roster on the off chance that like an OG Anunoby needs a spell because he has a bone bruise on his knee or something. Like you got to kind of find those guys.
Yeah.
So
Just one more thing about the Philly matchup. I'm thinking back, speaking of like the end of the bench guys, Ricky Council. I mean, he's a guy that he could have a big year this year off the bench for that Philly team. And if he takes on a big scoring role for this team, and those flashes in summer league were real, which I think they were. I mean, he just looked really comfortable out there. And if he can take on a big scoring burden from this team off the bench, that does help Philly a lot. And I think it helps them potentially just have the star power to overcome a team like maybe Milwaukee or the Knicks, where they just have, Embiid and Paul George and Maxey are just too good to not win a series against one of those teams, and they have the ability to overcome them.
Yeah, absolutely. Council will definitely get opportunities because again they have zero depth. So like
Yeah.
they're going to be looking, hey, who can give us what, and the young guys usually will get a little bit of a preference there just to see, hey, what have you got? So great point. Absolutely. You did mention the Bucks as well, so let's go ahead and move on to them. I think that the Bucks are a little bit more seasoned than some of these other teams. Lopez is going to be interesting in how he matches up with someone like Towns, because obviously he's more at home roaming the paint than he is on the guarding someone who can stretch the floor. And they don't really have anyone else that Lopez can guard, so that's the big point on me. How do the Bucks respond to the Knicks now being able to go 5 out? Because there's not a lot
at the 5.
What was that?
Giannis at the 5.
You're probably gonna have to do that.
Yeah, Portis or Giannis.
Go Giannis at the 5, Portis at the 4.
But they really don't have a lot of front court depth. Also, they have Torian Prince behind Giannis, Bobby Portis down there, and then after that, it's a lot of unproven names. Unless Middleton wants to slide up and play some small ball floor, and I don't think that's something Middleton really is comfortable doing. So I do think there is a little bit there. Giannis at the 5 probably is the answer. And then it's interesting because then you're saying, okay, who is Towns guarding? I'm looking at the depth chart over on my other computer here. And I guess they probably, if Portis slides in, they probably put Towns in whoever slides in, whether it's Prince or Portis, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting with Milwaukee, as they have, like, as you said, very seasoned team. It's a polite way to describe them as old. I think we have their average age is probably maybe a little bit younger now that they draft AJ Johnson and have like Chris Livingston. But I mean, this team is weird in that, yeah, they have these really young guys at like the end of their bench, and I don't know if these guys are going to contribute at all this year. And meanwhile, they're kind of just like, you have these years with Giannis where you kind of got to make it count, because he has not been healthy a lot during the playoffs recently. And the last time he was healthy, they won a championship, and you just kind of got to be ready for it. Like, can Middleton hold up over the course of the season? Is Brook Lopez going to be able to give you the same run he provided when you won the championship? I mean, there's just a lot of variability, I feel like, with the Bucks, and there's potential for things to go very wrong, especially when you have Doc Rivers as coach. I mean, there's a good chance that they're going to fall in the playoffs, and it's going to be, either a 3-1 collapse or just something where you're not really expecting them to lose.
Yeah, I think the Bucks are going to go as far as Dame takes them, because they brought in Dame to supplement a lot of scoring and take pressure off of Giannis from being, let's collapse on Giannis, or build a wall, as they like to say. Mm-hmm. But we got a lot of inconsistency out of Lillard last year because he was in and out of the lineup because he was injured. So if you can get, even if you can get Dame from, let's say, 4 years ago, that's quality. But right now, you didn't get a lot of that last year. So because Dame wasn't hitting a lot of those shots and opening up the floor, it really was still the Giannis show. But then they brought in a guy like Dame Lillard to give them that 1-2 punch. Of course, Middleton, I believe, was hurt, or he was coming back from injury for like the first quarter of the season. So he wasn't even back. And then as soon as he came back, he didn't really look like the same guy. He looked a step slow. He looked like Klay Thompson when Klay Thompson came back for Golden State. He looked just like that. So, and for lack of a better term, I know you talked to Pete about their age. I mean, they're basically the Lakers of the East. Like, they're the Lakers of the East. They're old. Like, they are. They're not really as seasoned because they're just old. Like, they don't have a lot of young talent. They're relying heavily on veterans. And with a bunch of young guys at the end of your rotation, you're just crossing your fingers that one of those guys pops because they need some kind of a jump start or a spark of some kind. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves 6 or 7 seed this year, possibly. Mm-hmm. The East is so weird like that. Like a team like Milwaukee being a 6 or 7 seed doesn't sound too far off because of the Doc Rivers effect. Because I have zero faith in Doc Rivers whatsoever, especially in playoffs. That is the king of collapses.
Yeah, he does have a history of collapses. What are y'all thinking as far as the Bucks' depth, though? Is Lopez someone they could move to supplement the depth elsewhere? Given that I don't think his fit right now, currently, looking at like how it matches up with the rest of the top teams, I just don't know how much Lopez does in any of these series. I guess against the 76ers, Lopez has value for sure. But against the Celtics and the Knicks, I don't see what value Lopez is really bringing in terms of starting. So is that someone the Bucks could look to move?
I mean, what do you get?
Yeah, like value-wise, yeah. I don't see it because I don't want to say he's a liability, but he is a mismatch. He's a mismatch for these top teams in the East. Like,
right,
these top teams in the East, their big men are far and away better. And it doesn't help that Lopez is also older. So they're at such a weird spot. Like they could implode. Like they are a team that could implode. And Giannis may regret signing that contract.
Oh, I absolutely think he's in this situation where this is a make or break year.
Yeah, Giannis probably should have waited.
He can wait for AJ Johnson to become a superstar.
Yeah, but then Giannis will be what, 34 by that time?
We were buying stock on the AJ Johnson Island.
No, I love the stock in AJ Johnson, but we're talking about Giannis, we don't even know how many more years this guy's going to play.
Yeah.
Like if anything, if it goes like the last 2 seasons have gone, there's not really much more Giannis has to do for his own career's sake. I mean, he's got a championship, he's got an MVP, like he's taking care of his brothers, he's taking care of his family, like he's done all of the things that most of us want to do for our own, lives. So, he could kind of be how Jokic is. Jokic is like, look, I just want to go to my farm and play with my horses. Like, like Giannis could be thinking something very similar, just not as vocal about it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point because guys, I mean, every superstar is kind of known for checking out mentally when their team is kind of out of contention. I mean, James Harden's famous for it, but there's guys like Jokic you could see. I mean, Denver's a team, we're not going to get onto the West, but Denver's a team where they've just lost pieces since the title. Like Milwaukee, they've lost pieces since their title. And now, are they going to be able to compete at the same level as, a team like the Wolves or the OKC Thunder? Maybe. Who knows? Right. And so I feel the same way about Milwaukee where, best case scenario, they can compete with these teams, but there's a lot of downside risk here.
Yeah. I mean, right now, could you confidently say a team like Milwaukee could beat Cleveland or Miami in a 7-game series right now? I don't think so. I don't have faith in that. Like, I just don't, because I don't think just Giannis is enough. Mm-hmm. And we don't know what we're going to get from Dame. So in a team like Cleveland's actually better than we think. Like, bringing back your star player and, him signing a contract with the youth around them and then still having some veterans, on the back end like that. The Cleveland's a very balanced team. Yeah. So, and just like last year in the East, that's one of those teams where it's like, hey man, you fall asleep and all of a sudden Cleveland's a 4 seed and you're like, hold on, wait, what are we doing here? So like the East is not the walk in the park it once was for certain teams. Like a team like Milwaukee, they have to stay on their toes or they find themselves out of contention or they're in the play-in potentially.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
I think with the East, it's easy to make the play-in the East.
Oh yeah,
it's not easy to make the top 6 though.
No,
not easy to make the top 6.
No,
there are more than 6 teams that are trying in the East, and they're all doing a great job. One team I really like, we probably won't get to talk about today. I'm deciding if they're my team or the Knicks out East, the Magic. Super fun team, also defensive focused, and so like all of these teams, I think are really interesting.
Not to mention the Pacers are back.
Right, the Pacers too.
Now they've got playoff experience, so they know what to expect now. So they could give a team like Milwaukee problems too.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Pacers, they have a lot more depth than some of these other teams out east.
Yeah.
Arguably
I
the
don't.
most depth.
Right. At guard, they got Hallie and McConnell, Nimhard, Matherin, Neesmith. The front court, they got Siakam, Turner, Walker, Toppin. I don't know if Wiseman's going to get many minutes come playoff time, but even that depth, I mean, is like it's better than some of these teams have as their backup five. And realistically, it's probably Siakam playing more of those backup 5 minutes, or Toppin possibly, but that seems very unlikely. But still, maybe you could pick and say, hey, their backup five isn't as strong as maybe the 76ers with Drummond. But otherwise, man, the Pacers are a team that I think could be a problem for the Knicks, just because they can throw fresh bodies. Like we saw in the playoffs, they can throw fresh bodies on the floor, while the Knicks, Tibbs doesn't like fresh bodies.
Yeah, but if Jalen Brunson,
they're good for filling up the water bottles.
If Brunson didn't wake up in that series, Indiana walks away with that.
Yeah.
Because I think games 1 and 2, Brunson was a non-factor to say the least. Like he really didn't come into his own until 3, 4, and 5. Because I think he was coming off of that ankle, if I remember correctly. He had messed up. He had done something to the ankle, I believe is what it was, and he was a little slow-footed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Pacers. I mean, I know playing the Celtics, they were probably the most competitive team against the Celtics. They really pushed them to the wire. They didn't have the experience to get over the hump and win a game, but I mean, they're a team that they play fast. Rick Carlisle has that team playing the right way, and he doesn't mess around when it comes to playing good basketball. He'll get on guys, and I think that retaining Andrew Nembhard is really good. I think that's great for them. I think their wing depth is the thing that really holds them back. But I think against the Knicks don't. I mean, Bridges and Anunoby are great, but I think those guys are not really guys who I'm expecting to drop, 20 plus a night. No. And I don't think that's how it's going to go. So I think they can get away with kind of playing like Neesmith on Mikal Bridges, and versus when you're playing Boston, no, you absolutely cannot get away with playing Aaron Neesmith on Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown.
You know what's going to happen.
We saw how that ended. It ended with Neesmith in the hoop. So it's an interesting thing with them where maybe like Jarris Walker has a big year and improves a lot.
Good call.
I was about to say him.
He's a defensive beast.
I think there's potential for him on the perimeter defensively that is a little bit untapped at this point, and that could be what moves them up to that upper echelon, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think it was talked about enough how important that acquisition of Siakam is. Siakam was their most experienced player. He's been to an NBA Finals. He came into his own in the finals. Like he really turned into the player we know him as now in the finals against that somewhat depleted, broken down Golden State team. But he became a very important, integral part of that Toronto Raptors team winning that championship. So like having his versatility and his experience with a guy like Halliburton and bringing in OG was huge for them because he obviously coming from New York and he had a point to prove. He was like, hey man, y'all shouldn't have traded me. And then he started busting their behind. And you're like, oh snap, like I forgot he played. You forget that some of these guys, like, they played for the Knicks. You're like, man, if they would have kept some of these guys, the depth these guys would have been ridiculous.
Yeah, I think another thing is we haven't talked about Miles Turner. And that's a guy who, I mean, similar to Porzingis, blocks shots at a really high level and can hit the three. And, I think that's something where that matchup with Towns, like, that's not a great matchup for Towns.
No.
I mean, he's losing that matchup, I think, on both ends, really. And it's going to be interesting to see, if that was a matchup again. Boy, it'd be a great match.
And I think it's because last year for Turner was injuries last year when he was in and out of the lineup a lot last year. Sabonis in the same boat before he was nicked up a lot. So like these guys didn't get their full run.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes a team like Indiana may be the wild card of the East this year. Like we're talking about the Knicks. The Knicks are the hype of the East, but the Pacers might be the wild card that we're like, wait a minute, Pacers might mess around and be the number 2 seed before it's all said and done. Like it's very possible in the East, and we'll just see how it shakes out. Like I really want to see what the standings look like at the All-Star break because I think it's going to tell us a lot about the playoffs in the East at the All-Star break.
Yeah, I think this isn't an Atlanta in 2021 situation where they're going to fall off. No. So, it's going to be interesting.
That does it for this episode of the Ahead of the Game podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like and share the video, and let us know what we got wrong in the comments.